Hey, theater students, let's talk about acting and actors. Maybe one of the most interesting things we can discuss in regards to theater, because it relates so much to our world outside of theater. Actors and acting are very important in all of our kind of entertainment in the 21st century. Even for people who don't go see plays regularly, even for a lot of you who have not seen a lot of plays, you probably do consume movies or TV or things on YouTube or whatever um, form of entertainment you consume. It has a profound effect on our society and the way we live. And it's all closely related to how we think about actors and acting in the actual theater that we are studying. So let's talk about a few things. Um, when we talk about theater, and I would say movies and TV, one of the ways to think about it is that the most important element is the actor and the performance, the live human being telling us the story that's being told to us. Maybe it's the actor and the story. Uh, a lot of people are important in theater. The director is important. I'm a director. That's my job. I think I'm pretty important, being in charge of the whole thing. But the audience doesn't see me up there on stage. The audience sees the actor, and that's what they relate to. My wife is a costume designer. I am sometimes a set designer. We think we're very important. We create this environment, we create this world, we create what people see, but it's really the actor that is telling the story. The playwright, obviously, very important, but they're not in the room. Everybody on the crew, everybody working backstage, everybody um, making theater happen, stage managers, the people who build the set, the people who build the costumes, the people who create and run the lighting. Without those people, theater as we know it could not exist. They are essential. But acting is the direct conduit through which stories get told to audiences. The same as when you watch a TV show. Your favorite TV show, if you have one, if you're into that kind of thing, you probably could talk about which actors you like the best, what you like about them, what their characteristics and qualities are, and you probably don't talk a lot about the cinematography or the teleplay or the various things that are really important and essential, um, but aren't that direct conduit to you. You may know that there is a recently settled writers' strike for the Writers Guild of America that writes television and movie for many of the main studios, and that the actors, Screen Actors Guild, um, are still out on strike. And one of the big issues they're dealing with is AI and whether that kind of thing can replace acting. And it's incredibly important to actors and to the people who make film and television, but also theater, the art form we're talking about here, um, because actors are so important. Because to replace that human connection would be a gigantic thing. And it's why when you watch like a superhero movie or something and it's not very good, some of them are very good, in my opinion, but lots of times they're not very good, it's quite alienating because you think those aren't really people. They're not really doing those things. They couldn't really do those things. That looks fake. And if you think that, it's because the actor is not making a connection with you. But we're talking about theater here. And the actor in theater is the person who the audience sees and from who they take the story. Um, People go to plays because they're like, oh, I heard that really good actors in it. Or they go because they hear it's a really good play. They hear it's a really good story. It's a famous play, maybe, or just a new play that a lot of people are buzzing and talking about. Clearly, the most um, famous and in the news recent play is Hamilton, which you may is like the one piece of theater that people who don't think about theater at all have probably thought about in the last 5 to 10 years. And there are two elements of it. One, it's a really unique story told in a unique way with people rapping and people singing in contemporary styles, but telling a story of the founding of the United States and George Washington and Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. But it's also the actors. The actors were really unusual. There were actors of color. There were actors who would not have in olden times been cast in those roles, and they were really good actors. And that is a profound connection to story and theater and material that we cannot deny. Um, One of the things we would say about actors are, along with singers and dancers, their body is their medium. A painter works in oil or watercolor on canvas or whatever in paint. Um, a sculptor works in clay or marble or whatever. A musician uses pitch and tone and notes and sound to create their art. A writer puts words down on paper to create images and ideas. An actor or a singer with their voice or a dancer, their body is what they create their art with, um, which makes for unusual and interesting training, unusual and interesting um, impressions we have of what acting talent actually is. Um, Actors reflect humanity, they reflect the world. When you watch acting, you make judgments about it, whether you know it or not. And the judgments you make are going to be like, oh, I don't believe them. Oh, they're really realistic. Oh, I think they're really crying. Um, I buy them as that character. I buy the relationship they have with the other character. Um, I believe them. And that is why acting, in terms of the training we do in the acting world, is a lot about observing the world, really taking it in and determining how it works and how human relationships and human interactions work, and then what we call telling the truth, being a believable character by actually believing and telling the truth yourself as an actor, um, and believing in the text, the play that you are performing. Um, uh, we use things like concentration and focus and observation to give actors the tools they need to kind of, in exciting and dynamic and creative and artistic ways, tell the truth about the world. Um, One of the things you've read in the materials that you have in this module about acting is this big difference between an internal approach or an external or representational approach. When I was younger, we used to call it um, psychological or representational. And it's basically the difference between, um, as an actor, do I go through a process that lets me feel the feelings and experience the emotions and want the things that the character I am playing wants, basically to become that character through an analysis of the character and through acting exercises that let me feel the character's feelings and want the character's wants, or that's internal, or do I externally decide how does this character walk? How does this character talk? How do they sound? How do they hold their body? How do they dress? How, from an outside, from an external approach, how do I see them? And then how does that communicate to the audience? Um, Historically, almost all acting, we think, because we can't go back in time and get exactly into the minds of actors, was external. They acted it out. They pretended. Um, and many actors are fairly external and are very good. You would think that they completely believe um, what they are saying and what they are doing, because they probably do. The external work makes them feel like the character and makes them express the feelings of the character. Um, but in the 20th century, in the last 100 years or so, a lot of acting and acting training and the kind of things people learn to do are based on a cat named Stanislavski, who was a Russian, and his many, many, many American disciples and believers. And it became very internal, very much knowing what the character wants, um, knowing the given circumstances of the character, which is all the things that are true about the character, like the beginning of the play or the beginning of the movie, and then uh, trying to pursue the desires of that character with other characters from an internal point of view. And when you are taking that internal approach as an actor, you're thinking both about what are the character's actual situations, what are their actual feelings, how do they actually live, what is their job, what is their age, um, what are their relationships, but also where do they fit in society? How do they feel internally? What is the in your notes? I believe it says biological, which is what is actually going on with the characters, sociological, which is where they kind of live in society and how they fit into the world that they're in the play, psychological, which is how they feel, and ethical, which is what are their standards, what are their morals, what are their feelings about things. Um, and a lot of the work that actors do in terms of training is based on that psychological internal work. Um, but also, a lot of the work that actors do in training is based on the external needs of an actor. Um, one of the things that we tell actors all the time, or at least I do as an acting teacher, is you really only have two ways to communicate through an audience: your voice and your body, if you include your face in with your body. All the audience knows about what they see from an actor is what they're doing and what they're saying. They can't reach into your mind. They can't know the research you've done. They can't know the back you've done. They see you up there in a costume looking sad and saying things that reflect sadness, and they think, oh, that guy's sad. Um, so you have your face and you have your body, and you need to train those. So a lot of actor training is psychological and internal, but a lot of it is working on the skills that you need. Actors train vocally. They train in terms of singing, but in terms of the use of your voice for articulation, for clarity, for volume and projection. Acting traditionally has been done in big theaters, and up until very recently, we never used microphones. And so an actor had to have a large, capable, clear voice so that people in 2,000 seat theaters could hear them with no microphone and they not appear to be yelling. Um, uh, Actors study dance, they study juggling, they study improv, they study Tai Chi, they study yoga, the Alexander technique, because your body must be a flexible instrument in order to convey a lot of different things. I studied uh, um, stage combat for 10 years every day to try to get myself to a place where I was a capable sword fighter and a capable teacher of like sword fighting, physical fighting, hand to hand combat, all those kind of things that occasionally happen on stage. And as you know, frequently happen in movies and TV. It's a lot of work. Uh, I'm not joking that it took me years and years and years just to get to be fairly competent at those things. Um, and there's a lot of other things. Actors famously are um, uh, should be fluent in dialects and accents and be able to do a southern accent and an English accent, but also know the difference between an Australian accent and a South African accent and a Scottish accent and an Irish accent. I will admit to you, I'm not very good at that. I'm okay, maybe better than the average person, but compared to my actor friends, I'm kind of miserable at making my accent specific, except for Southern and Cajun accents, which I'm really good at because I lived in Louisiana for 10 years. Um, Actors, it may go without saying, but they have to memorize large um, bits of dialogue and scripts. Um, and lots of times we as actors say, well, that's sort of the easy part. Anybody can do that. Acting is a hard, difficult challenge in a whole bunch of ways, both mentally and physically. Memorizing is just memorizing. But you still have to do it, particularly for large roles. It can be a challenge. And when I teach acting classes, students really, really struggle with memorization, whether it's because they're not putting enough effort in or it's just hard for them. And because they can't memorize the lines, frequently they also can't act. They may actually be competent at acting, but because they're struggling so hard to remember the lines, their acting does not look like it's very good. So it's an important part of what is going on. Um, One aspect of acting that I've thought so much about in my life is whether it is talent or skill that makes a good acting. And almost everybody would say, so, or maybe you would phrase it as talent versus training. Can you learn to be a good actor by working on it? And almost everybody would say, well, it's some combination of both. Um, in order to be a good actor, you have to have talent and then you have to work really hard. And I certainly believe that. But I have certainly met people that think anyone can be trained to be an actor if they just work hard enough. That is not my experience. Anyone can train to be a better actor than they started off with good training and by being in lots and lots and lots of plays or videos or movies or whatever and working really hard at it over years. You can get better. There's no doubt about it. Um, but there's also an element of natural skill. You have seen movies and TVs where like 16-year-old people um, play important roles and are naturally gifted and kind of magnetic on screen. Well, they didn't work at it for years and years and years and years. They're just naturally good at it. And a lot of people are just naturally struggle with it. It's a hard thing. It's really a struggle for a lot of people to be up in front of people. They get um, nervous and unexpressive and unartistic. Um, but theater actors in particular, because there's such a physical element to it, because you can't just bring the camera up close and look at nothing but their face, um, and because you have to have such a useful and expressive voice that is not just captured by a microphone very close to you, there really is a ton of work and a ton of training that goes into the most skilled actors. Although some people are just naturally good at it, I'll be honest. Let's break this up and go to part 2, if I can find the button to make this stupid thing stop.